What's up, family? My name is Ciera.
My name is Ashley.
And we are here to talk about all things single.
Yes.
Single ladies, this one is particularly for you. So, Pastor Ashley, I just wanted to sit down with you today and just ask a couple of questions that I have. And I think I can ask on the behalf of the single women that are just trying to navigate this season of life, in particular in the church. And I want to say, like, the not so elephant in the room is that the church don't always show love to the singles. Like, I just feel like when we come to church, everybody like, do you have a boyfriend?
Right.
Are you married? And then when we say no, it's like, oh, well, are you dating? Like, where's your husband? When do you plan on getting? You got kids? You want kids? It's like everybody is always trying to point us to relationship, being in covenant, being with somebody. Yeah. Why do you think that is?
Man, way to just start us off.
I just want to know. I just want to know. The church mothers be questioning us.
I feel like some part of it is intent versus impact, right? I don't think the church itself wants to make any person feel like that, right? We always say things like, you belong here, welcome home, all those things. So I think the first thing is, this is like, oh my God, that's not how we want you to feel.
Okay.
But I think there's some blind spots that we have that come from culture too. Like if I can say, even for me personally, when I grew up, it was like when I become 25, I'm going to get married, I'm going to have my 2 kids and a whole family. And honestly, that was my story. Yeah. So it's even hard to have conversations like this because for me, my single season was
it was short. You had a good love life.
It was short.
Not all of us could.
Ups and downs.
Yep, it's okay.
But it was short. But I think culture kind of pushes that like the only time you can be celebrated is when you get married. Right. Or it's even our language that I know for Pastor Vernon and myself, it was a blind spot for us. Okay. As he's communicating on stage, he's talking about married couples and things like that. Yep. And I remember someone saying like, hey, like there are other relationships that we can celebrate, the friendships that we can celebrate. Yes. So I think also the blind spots that we have, and now I've taken the approach because I'm praying for y'all.
Thank you.
I'm praying for y'all. The dating life is a little hard, but I've taken the approach to be a listening ear.
Okay.
For some time, I thought I needed to be a problem solver. I'm like, okay, so we need a singles group. We need a singles ministry. Yes. We need this, we need that. Yes. And then you get a singles ministry and everybody want to feel like they got to find their mate in the singles ministry. Yes. And then the men sometimes in the singles ministry, they're becoming...
We're not going to talk about it. We won't.
So what I've learned to have a posture now is really just to have a listening ear. That's my hope for the church. Yeah. To have a listening ear, but also to have shared language that it doesn't have to be the final step is marriage. Right. There's so much that can happen before that and during that season.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you said something about that it shouldn't just be relationships that are celebrated, but we should also be celebrating our single season. We should be celebrating the fact that we are trying to become whole while we're single. So what advice would you give to somebody who is in their single season? Okay. How should we be preparing? What should we be doing? How do we make the most out of our now?
Yeah. I think the first part is cliche, but it's really get to know God and get to know yourself. Yeah. I find that emotional intelligence is really important. So like, how do I see myself? Okay. How do others see myself? How do I manage conflict with other people? There are a lot of people who have a very low emotional intelligence, and we need it.
We have to do a little bit better.
Just knowing yourself, being so self-aware, I think is one of the parts that you can be really intentional about. Okay. Knowing God, of course, like understanding Him. We talked the other day about just the story of David and how he just so intimately knew God through his challenges, through his ups, through his downs. But there was a relationship that he was able to cultivate because he knew the Father and he wanted to get to know Him. So I think that's a piece of it. For sure. I would also say to discipline your desires, not to get rid of them. Okay. A lot of times we think about singleness is like, oh, I can't, I gotta leave all of these things. And I'm like, no, you're gonna need them desires. Okay. They have to be back. They gotta come back. Come back. In your married season. But I think the approach should be really to discipline the desires and not just like, okay, I take this away. No, you need it, but it's in its right time. Yeah. Another thing, lastly, I would say is just diversifying your circle. Yes. So not just being around single people, like there are married couples that you can be around even now to kind of glean from, and really just get to know them more, like the wisdom that's there. Yeah. I think sometimes we can be so isolated and like, oh, you don't understand what I'm going through, so I'm gonna go over here. And it's like, no. You need the wisdom now. And I would say just choosing gratitude over anything else. Like being able to stand in what God has already done. Singleness is not a season to endure. It's the season that you can cultivate, you can nurture. It's the season that you can celebrate in. It's not just, I got to endure this now for the next. No, enjoy the now.
Enjoy it.
Enjoy it.
I love that. Yeah. Come on now, Sylvan. Well, while we're in our now, a lot of times we go to these singles events. We even have moments at our church for, you know, singles to come together. And I just tend to see that the ratio is a little off. It's a lot of women, and the men are just a little slim. And so I feel like that tension and that struggle now creates the thought that I have to settle as a single woman because there's nobody out here. Like there's no one who is walking with the Lord or going to wait until they're married to have sex, or we just start being like, well, I'll just kind of go with whatever because that perfect guy does not exist. Do you think that's true? And do you feel like we should settle because we feel like there's nobody out there?
No. Okay. My immediate response in my head is like, no, stop settling. Like, we're not going to do that.
Yeah.
Come back around. Okay. We're not going to do that. I think it's really important to acknowledge, one, where that comes from. The fact that you feel like you, in particular, have to settle.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, if I think about even conversations that we had, it's like, where is that coming from? Right. That you're like, this is all that is for me.
Yes.
Right? That's, to me, that is like something internal that says, like, you're not able to see what God sees. Because I think God wants you to have the best. Right? So we even look at the scripture sometimes. I remember us sitting down, and one of our favorite scriptures is Psalm 139. And when we look through that, it's like, okay, who does God say I am? He says I'm fearfully made. He says I'm wonderfully complex.
Yes.
In one of those versions, like he literally knows me by name. And then when we got to that end, we talked about how, like, but we have to be able to say, God, search me.
Search me.
No.
Test me. Test me.
Yeah, all of those things come in seeing how God sees us. Being able to see what he wants for us. And when we know that, we're able to be confident never to actually settle for anything less. I think also the importance to acknowledge that this is hard, right? It's hard.
Yes.
There are seasons that it does feel lonely. It also is seasons where you feel like there's rejection.
Right.
And I think that in those areas, it's important to lean upon others who can walk that journey with you. But also, I think it's really important that you just continue to address your patterns. What's causing you to go back into the cycle of saying, I got to settle for this. It's nothing more out here. And it's like, no, like truth says that God wants the best for you. Truth says that he sees you as fearfully and wonderfully made. So like be able to walk in that and align to someone that also sees it.
That's so good.
Yeah.
That's so good. Well, I'm glad. I feel like you are in a marriage where, you know, your man sees you. He sees who you are, what God has placed inside of you. I would just love to know. I also know that you didn't necessarily have a super long single season. You know, she found her a good one, y'all. When she was 16, right?
16.
So they've been
with some breaks.
Okay.
Had some breaks.
Yeah. Okay. Can we talk just how did you navigate those moments of like, okay, I feel like, because I believe you talked about God told you like, that's your husband, but like he just playing around right now. How did you prepare even in those moments of singleness to still like develop yourself and what you wanted to, you know, who you want to be as a wife, as a girlfriend even, and what was that single season like for you?
I feel like I remember the pivotal role for me, or the pivotal moment where it was just like, okay, I know that God has called me to marry Vernon, but he can't see it. And because he can't see it, I can't continue to just sit here and just be like, I'll just sit here.
Right.
So I think in the short season that it was for me, I embraced my singleness. I said like, hey, I am complete. I am whole.
That's good.
It compliments me.
That's good.
But I'm complete.
Yeah.
And that thing lifted. It got light for me. It was like, I can walk in a new level of freedom now, because it's like, no, like God completes me.
Yes.
And now he compliments me. And if he decides to come along in this journey with me, it's going to be blessed.
Right.
It's going to be blessed. But if he doesn't, it's still going to be blessed.
It's going to be blessed.
And that's okay. And so I think in that season, and everybody could tell you, like, Vernon it was hard.
He was down bad.
He was down bad.
He should have been. Look at her.
He was down bad.
Why would you? It's like Jay would cheat on Beyonce. Like, why would you do that? He didn't cheat on you, but he just like, why would you leave her?
He had to go through.
He had to learn.
He had a long process, right? And that happens sometimes.
Yes.
But in the midst of him doing that, I also needed to go through my process. And that was a part of walking in that freedom that, hey, like, I'm so happy that God completes me. And now I'm going to enjoy this season. And the thought that sometimes people are like, well, you need to enjoy this now because when you get married, I'm like, even changing that language to me is important because it almost promotes either or. Like, well, you need to enjoy this now because when you get married. And it's just like, well, enjoy this, but then you'll know that you'll enjoy this too. Like, it's the now and next that we talked about, like being able to cultivate and nurture the now, but also knowing the next is also going to be waiting for you, and it's going to be good too. Like, it's not either or, it's both.
That's so good. Yeah, that's encouraging. You've encouraged me. I would love to know, just even in your time of like dating Pastor Vernon, what were some things that you learned once you were in marriage that you're like, man, I'm really glad that I did this in my single season?
I feel like, I don't know if this is personality, but it kind of goes back to the complete and complimenting. I needed to be okay with being alone too, like being able to not rely on him for my happiness. And we always tell each other, even now, that like we're going to pursue holiness over happiness.
Yes, it's good.
And I think that's going to be important because once again, he doesn't complete me; he complements me. And so there are seasons where I'm walking through things and like I can't expect but so much for him. Like he's human just like I am. And so like having that assurance that like, hey, we're going to pursue this holiness over the happiness is going to be important. And I have to resolve within myself some things that only me and God can work. And I think that has made our marriage more fortified, really.
That's good.
That we're going to walk through life together. But some things only God can provide.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's good. Well, I want to wrap our time up, but I have one more question.
Okay.
We talked about relationships, the waiting for our, significant other, how to enjoy the now, all of that. Waiting for relationships is one thing, but waiting for sex is a whole nother thing. And culture, it's just in our face, Pastor Ashley. We are really trying to do our best. What advice do you have for us single women who are trying to wait for marriage?
Yeah. I think, that conversation is sometimes hard, especially for us who are married, because many of us did not wait. So even for me and Pastor Vernon, we did not wait. We waited 1 year. We decided before our marriage, 1 year, we would decide to wait. And prior to that, we tried a lot.
Okay.
It was hard. We tried a lot and it just didn't work. But that 1 year right before marriage, we made the commitment to wait. And that first thing that I would suggest is like, we wanted to honor God. We wanted to say like, hey, if you have called us to be together, like we want to honor you no matter what. Now I'm going to say Pastor Vernon was already in ministry and it was still
really
very much so a struggle.
That's good to know. I feel like sometimes people feel like once you're in ministry, it's like, oh, the struggle leaves. No, like the desire goes away.
It doesn't.
It's not the case.
It's not the case. And so we really had to put a lot of boundaries in place. And even now looking back, I would have put probably even more boundaries in place. But it was times that I would go to his house late and it was like, nope, this is a boundary we need to have. Certain things I would wear around him that I needed to put a boundary around to say like, okay, this is not what we need to be wearing.
The body was body.
The body was body. Another thing we had in place, we started to invite other people in where we were trying to go so that they can hold us accountable to it. So they could say like, hey, like y'all are kind of getting a little comfortable with each other. I think even his mom noticed like y'all are getting too comfortable.
A little close on the couch.
So it's those little things that do make a drastic difference. And just being able to communicate with someone else and acknowledge like this is hard, but I want to honor God. And we're worth the wait. I value myself enough that I know that I'm worth the wait.
That's so good. Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you so much for that. I know I've been blessed by this conversation. I know that the women who are watching are going to be blessed by this conversation. So ladies, we're going to wait. We're going to nurture our now, know our worth. And thank you so much.